Hello everyone and welcome to the NPC Dungeon. Today's video is going to be all about parties. They can be difficult because they're one of those large-scale encounters that I've talked about before on this channel, link below and card above if you want to see that video. So a lot can happen, but they're also predominantly social, which presents a whole other layer of difficulty. I also have a video where I talk about those kinds of encounters, so I'll leave a link and a card to that one as well. I actually just recently ran a party-like encounter and I'll be honest, I haven't run too many of them in the past, but I really enjoy them, and I've picked up on a few tricks that I think are pretty useful, and I hope will help you too. So let's get started and let's learn something. First, a quick disclaimer. This video will not be a huge comprehensive guide to running these types of encounters. I'm going to just share a few tricks that I've learned and then relate them to the overall idea of a party encounter and how it works and why these points work. Also, I won't be breaking this video up into several parts like I usually do. It will just be like a broad kind of discussion, reason being these encounters are very interrelated and interconnected. Every part that I could mention is related to another, so I think this style will do more justice and kind of build off of itself so that my points make more sense instead of just being kind of thrown together piecewise. With all that being said, let's actually begin now. I want to start off by reiterating that pretty much every interaction, event, encounter, or whatever you want to call it is going to have at least some social aspect to it, which means you're going to need some NPCs, and you're going to need to know and flesh out these NPCs. I'm not saying to make full backstories for all of them and give them all stats. By the way, I have videos on that. I will leave a link and a card to them if you want to watch them, but give them a name, a brief physical description, a few personality traits, and some discussion topics they might bring up. Bonus points if it's related to the story. What I recommend doing is this. While you're preparing, make a list of some of the NPCs that might be here. You don't need a full comprehensive guest list, just a few so that your players have people to talk to in case they run into someone or someone speaks to them. These kind of become your stock encounters for when your players do something a little unexpected. Again, bonus points if these NPCs are somehow related to the overall story. And even though not every NPC has to be super related to the overall story, and there's nothing wrong with a random funny encounter every now and then, there inevitably will be at least one or two that are. Think, what are your players doing here? It's probably related to a specific NPC. Are they there to either talk to them, attack them, steal something from them, or something else? Ask yourself, what are they doing? In the case of these important NPCs, you need to know where they are and what they are doing during all of the parts of this party, so that when your players try to interact with them or do something big, you know how the most important parts of this encounters, aside from your players of course, will react based on where they are and what they are doing. This is another one of those things to plan out ahead of time and know well before the encounter even begins. And it's also a really good reason why having these kinds of encounters broken up into parts is really useful. I mentioned this idea of breaking up your large-scale encounters into parts in my video on this subject, but I'm going to reiterate it here because it's just so important. I recommend having at least some scheduled events, and by this I don't mean try to say, okay, I'm going to do this and then my players will do that. No, because it will never, ever work out that way. What I'm saying is to have some kind of overall structure to make this encounter easier to think about and organize. Otherwise, it can be all too easy to just get lost in the kind of mess that these types of giant encounters can become. For example, you might have a part where the guests enter in and are introduced. You might then have some kind of feast, and then have everyone filtered out into an auditorium of some kind where they might watch a performance take place, and then end it off. But what you do depends on what you want to happen in the party that you design for your players. And while we're talking about planning, and while we're talking about your players, let's talk about planning for what your players might do. When you give them a party, or really any type of encounter in general, it's important that they have some kind of goals, something to accomplish, some reason for being there. Like I said earlier, they might have to speak with a certain NPC, attack someone, or steal something, or something else, again, depending on your specific campaign and encounter. This helps you to focus your planning and give them some direction so the encounter doesn't meander. And this goal could be in the form of something as direct as someone telling them to go here and complete some kind of job or something, or something as indirect as there being a gap in some kind of investigation that players are involved in with the possible lead being at the party. And in actual practice, when your players sneak around or talk to an NPC or do anything, I like to make the DCs here just a little bit lower. The reason being this: in this setting, your players are surrounded by other people and guards who might see them. If you tried to be realistic or even just make the DCs what you normally would, they would never be able to do anything. I say the same thing when it comes to prison break encounters. I'll leave a link in the card as always to those videos if you're curious, but this doesn't mean that your players will succeed on everything they do. I like to have a few countermeasures in the back of my mind before I even begin the encounter. An obvious one might be guards checking weapons at the door. Another less obvious but much more important one would be to consider what would happen when your players start causing some kind of shenanigans. What if they get caught? Will guards arrest them and lead them to some kind of prison break arc? Is there a crime boss watching who has control over some of the guards and will recruit the players? Will there be some kind of attack that will completely overshadow what the players do and give them a chance to escape or a cause to do something else? These questions need to be in the back of your head long before the encounter actually begins. You need to have a good idea of a few different ways it might end. Think, what if this or that plan your players might come up with is successful? If they talk to the NPC, what will the NPC say? how'll that go, and so on. And all these things that you can think of before the encounter actually takes place gives you ideas to build off of in practice when you inevitably need to start to improv. So I know that was a lot, so I'm going to do a quick recap. So to recap, have a list of possible stock NPC encounters, flesh them out, and know where they're going to be and what they're going to do. Figure out what your players' goals will be and know which NPCs are related to them and are most important, and know where they will be and what they're going to do. Have a basic structure to this encounter so that it's easier to organize and run, and when you run it, make the DCs a little lower than you typically would, have countermeasures in mind, and have a few basic ideas of how it might end. And that's it. Thank you so much if you stuck with me for this long, and I really hope this video is useful to you. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any other points or questions or ideas about the ones that I listed here. Come back next week where I'll talk a little bit about the other jobs as DM you might have that don't just involve running the game. And this is usually the part where I'd say come back next week where I'll have another story prepared, but I'm going to take a brief break from telling stories for a little while. I'm very sorry if you like the stories that I usually tell, but I need a little bit of a break from them for now. I will try to get back to them in the future as soon as I can, but until then, I do have one this week that you can check out if you like. It is about an interesting discovery that my players made in my most recent campaign, the campaign I'm running right now actually, and it begins right where my last one left off. Again, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, let's learn something.